Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, today it's Scribble sticks, because I want to find out what these things are and what they can do. I want to know, will they work on light color and dark colored things? Will they write over paint? Are these things more like a crayon or an oil pastel or a watercolor or a colored pencil? I have an inquiring mind and I want to know. So I've grabbed these and I've grabbed some stuff and I'm just going to play around with them in my art journal. Now I'm going to stencil a word with them, but I'm spelling impaired. So what I'm going to do is help myself and cheat a little bit with the ever fancy Post-it note. I'm going to write the word out here so that way when I'm stenciling it, I can actually get the right letters. I've learned through experience that yeah, I tend to mess this up big time. Part of the reason why I mess it up is because of how I position or center my letters. I actually start at the end of the word, so at the end of the page, because I want the word to go all the way to the very edge of the page, so that's why, and then I have to work backwards, so that makes it even harder for a spelling impaired person. Now I think I also want to play with the entire rainbow here, so yeah, that's a shocker, isn't it, that I want to play with the rainbow? So I'm going to pick a different color for each letter. Now what I'm doing is basically coloring in where the letter is. I don't have to be precise or perfect because I'm going to test these out with water and see how they look with that. And so when you're doing this technique, you may want to be sure that you're using a stencil that has wide enough openings in it. That's part of the reason why I picked my Ransom alphabet stencil here that I created for over at StencilGirl Products, because I knew it had some big, bold, thick letters that would be no problem to color in with these. Now in my hand, these things feel like a crayon. They're about the size of a crayon and have that feeling, but when I'm writing with them, they have an awful lot of the feel of a colored pencil. But I know they aren't exactly a colored pencil, and they're not exactly a crayon. So it's kind of hard to put these things into one specific category. It's like they've got little pieces and parts from all different kinds of art supplies all rolled into one. Well, now that I've got my word on there, I could leave it just the way it is, but I want to see how these things react with water. So that's why I'm just taking clean water and a little brush and I'm painting over it. I'm not keeping everything perfect, and what I'm going to do is actually smear some of it around to actually change the shapes of the letters just a little bit. Now I will confess that when I did the yellow, I put a lot of pigment on there. I did a lot because I know yellow can be such a soft color. So to make sure that it stood out, I definitely had to put a lot on there. Oh, and the red, wow, does that have a lot of pigment? That thing just really popped. There's a lot of color with that one. So I can definitely get a really easy watercolor look with these just by hitting them with water, and they definitely reacted very nicely. But can I do something with a little more precision with these? And the answer is yes. Testing that out by putting some circles on here just to see how it feels going with a larger circle and then getting into more detail. So using them this way, it very much has the feel of a colored pencil. And obviously if I don't push quite as hard, I won't get quite as much color. And if I push really hard, I'm going to get a lot more color. Well, I am really into the rainbow on this, so I'm going to put a giant rainbow up there. Now I decided if I use the fine tip, I'm going to get fine little lines. And because I want to cover so much area and I'm so impatient, I'm just going to use the back end of these where I've got a flatter area and I can basically get more color on there quickly. Now the question is, do I leave it like this where it looks kind of sketchy? Part of me is thinking maybe, but maybe not. I think I'm going to hit it with a little bit of water. Now the paper that I'm using in this art journal is unprimed, so it's naked paper on there. So there's no gesso, there's nothing like that, which means things are going to absorb into it. Now sometimes when I work on paper like this and I'm using some watercolor pencils or watercolor crayons, one of the things that'll sometimes happen is the pigment embeds into the paper and I can't quite get it to move around when I turn it into watercolor by hitting it with water. That is not happening with these. So I'm able to absolutely pull up all the color and make it look like a really nice watercolor wash. I'll also tell you a little trick. The red, I didn't push as hard on the red because of how bright it was when I did the letter. So I knew don't put quite as much there because it was going to be powerfully vibrant. Now what about working on top of dark colors? You saw it all on white, but I'm wondering if these things will write on dark. Are they opaque enough to show up? And the answer is yes. Every one of the colors is showing up. Now this happens to be a gel print, one of my cleanup prints from playing around, but what I was really looking for was just something very dark to experiment and play with. So now here comes the big test. Will white work on the black? Will white be opaque enough to show up on the black? And by golly, it is. I was surprised that the white does show up and it writes really easily. So now if I hit it with water, I mean, we know from the earlier stuff that it will react to water. How will it show up on the dark when it's hit with water? And because you're basically thinning it out with water, it's not nearly as vibrant, but it does a nice job tinting and coloring the white areas on the print, so it spreads it around as a really nice watercolor for that. But the black paint on this, well, it was kind of a matte paint, and I want to grab something that has a glossier, shinier, slicker kind of texture to the paint to see if these things will write easily on top of that. So I grabbed another gel print, and this time it was made with a different kind of paint, and this stuff was kind of slick. And absolutely, the Scribble sticks write right on top of that. Oddly enough, if I use orange on top of pink, it's really hard to see, so I decided to try and do some contrasting colors, and they absolutely write. But what about bleeding? Is this stuff going to bleed right through paint that I put on it? Well, to test that, I grabbed some white paint. Now I'm going to apply the white paint with a Catalyst Blade tool, and that way I can just kind of get it on the top without really mixing anything in, and I'll show you in a second why that's a big deal to me. What I want to do is just be able to float some paint right on top of it. I'm putting a fair amount of white paint on here, and it's a very opaque paint. I don't want to see any of the color on this immediately when it's all wet, because I want to see if the colors will start to bleed up through it, because that's really what I'm trying to test here. And while I'm giving it a moment to dry and give it some time for that color to bleed up through if it's going to do that, I'm going to play around with this one up here. By putting the white paint on it and then grabbing a paintbrush, you can see how I'm changing the color of the paint. So basically, if the Scribble sticks would react to water, they'll mix in with paint too, so you can absolutely use it for that. Already there's some of the pink on that bottom one that is coming through. I will tell you, rather than waiting for this all to dry and making you wait, that the pink bleeds right on up through there. Completely and totally that pink comes roaring in there. The other colors, not so much, but anything with the reds, the pinks in it, those seem to bleed through. Now you didn't think I'd leave all that white space white, did you? As I'm writing with the Scribble stick here and doing some Scribble journaling, if my hand drags across it at all, it's not going to smear. When these things are dry, if you rub your hand over it, it's not going to smear. So in that way, they are not like an oil pastel. Now overall, I think these things are pretty cool. Dina did an awesome job coming up with these. And the biggest thing to me about these, the thing that excites me the most, is the fact that it writes over paint and that it works well over dark colors, because being able to write over something dark, that's often the challenge. So for that reason alone, these things are going to stay in my arsenal, and I'm looking forward to using them again. Now, even though this video is coming to an end, it doesn't mean the play has to end here. You can find my free workshop called Permission to Play over on my blog at acolorfuljourney.com, as well as my free newsletter that includes things like sparks of artspiration for you to download. And of course, the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, that way you'll know as soon as I have another video out. Well, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.